Hello and welcome to our bi-monthly International Women's Writing Guild open mic. We are so glad to see you and hear you all, have you all here tonight for our two features. I'm really excited with Elizabeth C. Haynes and Martha Hunt Handler. We have two women who are going to be reading from their books, their new books tonight, one in fiction and one in memoir / self-help. And we will explain that when we get to it. But I just want to let you know that it is Sunday night, November 1st, and we have two open mics per month. One is on a Sunday night as it is tonight, and then we have one on a Thursday, usually around the middle of the month at 2 p.m. And I'll announce the rest of the schedule before we close tonight. I also want to introduce, if I didn't say so, I'm Kelly Dumar, and I want to introduce Katerina Konen, my colleague from the board of the International Women's Writing Guild, and so grateful to have her here as always. She is backing me up, backing all of us up with her great attentiveness to our open mic list. And I see Leslie Neustadt, who's also a member of our board. So glad that you're here tonight, Leslie. Thanks for being here. And let's just go over the open mic for just a second before I introduce our features, Katerina. We're trying something a little bit new with our registration for the open mic. It's been really complicated for us to try to have a wait list because of the way that Wild Apricot on the back end manages the registration. So Michelle has made some adjustments to the way that registrations happen. And we have a limited list, and we're not keeping a wait list, at least for the foreseeable future. We're trying out this other processes that we're accepting a certain amount of people, and then what we have is a number of no-shows or people who have to cancel at the last minute, and we think we're going to come out just right. We're hoping so. Katerina, as you take a look at our list tonight of readers in the open mic, how does it look? Are you looking, I know you're busy looking around, you're seeing who's here, and do you want to check in? Do you want to read the list once out loud? And now please make sure, if you believe you signed up to be a reader and you do not hear your name when Katerina reads it, please write to her or all of us in the open mic and just raise your hand wildly. And we don't want to miss anybody who signed up and if there was a glitch. So please let us know that you're here and your name wasn't mentioned. All right, that's if you did get a confirmation that you got signed up to read tonight. And also just really want to welcome all our listeners. Thank you for coming and listening. I mean, that means so much to us. And not only listening, you're so good, you're so kind, you're so perceptive and insightful. Your comments in the chat room about what's read here tonight are just so valued and so welcome. We really appreciate that you're here. So, because we need listeners like you. So Katerina, tell us who's here to read tonight.
All right, it's Neoma Utugbi, Cipra Roy, Nancy Good, Maggie Davenport, Lisa Rhodes Riapchi, Janice Alper, N. Regina Jackson, Sally Stevens, Natalie Hurt, Catherine O'Neill, Karen Gonzalez, Anya Achtenberg, Chipra Shukla, Lisa Margel, Laura Engel, Deborah Garcia, Susan Hajek, Alicia Valasi Polius, Sandra Hayes, Lujira Cooper, Leslie Neustadt, Barbara Huntington, and Jackie Kellum.
Barbara Huntington did have to cancel, Katerina. So
yes, I saw that.
Okay, great. And so what Katerina does is, please make sure if you can that rename yourself if your name is not visible, because what Katerina does is she goes through and she checks her list and checks it twice to make sure everybody is here. And then we just cross off the people that aren't here. We will be reading the list again. And then the one other thing, so please feel free to talk to Katerina. You can send her a chat in the chat room and tell her how to pronounce your name, or tell her if you want to be taken off the list or anything. But one more reminder, so important for those of you who are new, we time our open mic readings. All right, it's 3 minutes tops. And I literally set a timer when you begin talking. So even if you're going to introduce your poem or the segment from your book, you need to include that in your 3 minutes. It's very helpful if you time your readings as a practice session before you come. And I will have to cut you off if you go over 3 minutes. So I'll interrupt you. And you guys have been doing such an amazing job of coming in under time that I haven't really had to do that. Please don't take it personally if I do have to cut you off. It's not personal. It's just that we have, as you can see, a really exciting long list of people in our open mic, and we just want to make sure we have time to get to everybody. Now I'm going to hit the recording button because, or did I already did. Oh, my goodness, I already did. That's right. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first reader, Elizabeth C. Haynes. She's going to be reading tonight, and I'll have you unmute in just a minute, Elizabeth, or you can go ahead and unmute now. There's no reason you can't unmute now. But I want to introduce and tell you a little bit about Elizabeth and her background and her book, and then she's going to read for about 6 minutes from her book, and then I'm going to introduce Martha Hunt Handler, and she's going to do the same, and then we're going to open it up. If you have any questions for either of these authors, please feel free to put them in the chat room. Certainly your comments about what they're reading, put it in the chat room. But also any questions, because we'll have a little bit of a talk back afterwards. And if I see your question, I will pose it to them. So Elizabeth is an abuse and trauma survivor, a former yoga teacher, a rare disease sufferer, and a kindness warrior. She was born in Texas, and she holds a BA in literature from Kansas State University. She's been writing professionally since 2004. She writes poetry, memoir, other things, and her nonfiction that she's presenting tonight. She writes about the things that are close to her heart, the experiences she has had in life, and the beauty that can be found in the natural world. Elizabeth left corporate America in 2020 after serving as a managing editor and head of marketing content. She's now a reader for the Baltimore Review, and she works as an independent editor, book marketer, and writing coach. And she has 2 additional books in progress. She's also planning to release a collection of poetry. So her first book that she's going to read from tonight was released in August 2020, and it's called Halfway There, Lessons at Midlife. I will be putting the link to this book in the chat room, but welcome, Elizabeth, and thank you so much for coming and telling us about your book tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everybody. This is weird. I haven't done this before. So here's my little book. That's not my cat. That's not my foot, but it represents me pretty well. So this is just a book of about 44 little short stories from my life, but it's kind of in the context of what you can learn to get through your life, to get through the rest of your life, to process your past, some of the crap that you've gone through, so that you don't, you can have a better future. That's kind of why I wrote the book. So the chapter I'm going to read from tonight is called When Life Doesn't Go as Planned, which I think a lot of us can relate to. On my 35th birthday, I found myself in one of those laboratories where they line you up like cattle and stick you in the arm, one person after another, and draw out your blood like a mosquito. It's an annoyance for some people and an absolute anxiety attack for others. Where do I fall on that spectrum? Well, I struggle to hold on to consciousness every single time. This particular visit to the lab was especially frustrating because I was getting 17 vials, yep, that's right, of blood drawn, plus I had to drink something particularly acrid and breathe into a bag about 60 seconds later, all in the name of figuring out what was wrong with me. This was the extent of what I did for my 35th birthday. I was in the midst of waiting for my gallbladder removal surgery and therefore couldn't eat a smidgen of fat, which basically means you can't eat anything. So I went home and sucked down some chicken broth and called it a night. On my 36th birthday, I found myself unusually lonely in my longtime city. My best friend had moved away the month before, and my other good friend had dropped me like a hot potato after my 2 surgeries. Another had bailed when I got married without giving me any explanation as to why. So my dear husband attempted to cobble together a last-minute dinner with whomever he could find. And I ended up quietly sharing a meal with two couples, one who is dear to me, but who arrived exceptionally late, and another who I hardly knew, but whose wife got plastered and loud, embarrassing me greatly. I didn't want to have another birthday. On my 37th birthday, I found myself at home on my couch, scowling at my husband's leg propped up on some pillows because he'd injured his knee in basketball 3 days earlier. We were supposed to be in Florida, waving hello to Mickey Mouse and subsequently collapsing onto the nearest beach. But we'd had to cancel our trip less than 12 hours before the flight. So for that birthday, I ate lunch with my husband, enjoyed a gluten-free cake that my best friend had frantically ordered from the local bakery, fed some ducks at a nearby pond, and then trekked it on home to ring in another year of my life. Sometimes things just don't go as planned. My own life has felt like a long string of coincidences, detours, unexpected setbacks, and totally not what I thought I'd be doing instances. It's been a ride I might have gotten off of had I known earlier on what was to come. And it's nothing like how I used to imagine myself as a grown-up. You know, the plans I devised for myself in my quiet moments. I imagined dinner parties with friends where I arrived in my best clothes and laughed contentedly. I pictured a house of my own, a nice one full of pretty things and high quality furniture, with an exceptionally clean carpet that was nothing like the stained, fur-covered messes of my childhood. I dreamed of vacations and romance and taking trips to the theater because I would be cultured and refined, of course. But when I got to the actual grown-upness, I was underwhelmed to find my life was set in an apartment. It was one that got progressively nicer over the years, but it was still an apartment. And while I did have a few pieces of nice clothing, I never got invited to dinner parties, so I rarely wore them. I didn't laugh contentedly with friends for very long either, because they often moved away or had kids or changed their minds about the friendship or shifted their priorities. I had a husband, but it was after spending many years as a divorcee. That hadn't been expected either. And while our marriage continues to be wonderful and happy most of the time, it didn't unfold like one of the romantic comedies I'd watched in my adolescence. I'd had to educate myself elsewhere about relationships since my parents had divorced when I was 3 years old. It's really easy to get discouraged when you examine your life and start noticing all the things that you wish weren't there, like the job you don't really want to have, or the white wall across from your couch that you thought would contain a fireplace by now. Or maybe it's the health that ran away and doesn't want to return, or the relationship that fizzled for reasons you don't understand. It's also easy to fall into thinking that you fatally messed up and it's too late to fix it, that you're just too old or you don't know how. And then there are bills over here and obligations over there, and you're so tired at the end of the day that you stretch out on your sofa, which is still not across from a fireplace, until you pass into the darkness of sleep. You've missed the boat, you think, so you may as well camp out where you are. But life always gives us chances to course correct and to create a new plan if we can get past the internal noise. The first question is, do you pay attention to the messages when they come? And after that, and this is important, do you follow through? So that's the excerpt. There's a couple more pages of that where I kind of talk about how maybe, you know, those life-changing events are not always life-changing like you thought they'd be, because you kind of come out of the event into your same life. But that's kind of the theme of my book. So thank you so much for listening. That's all I got.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We will definitely want to have some questions for you after we hear from Martha. So thank you. And listeners, if you have something you would like to ask Elizabeth about, please feel free to put your question or comments into the chat room. All right, I'm going to remove your spotlight and I'm going to ask Martha, there you are, to unmute unless you have already.
I have.
Great, thank you so much. Elizabeth and I, when we said hello tonight to Martha, we were so impressed with her beautiful poster in the background of her wonderful novel. And because it apparently was ordered as part of her book tour that hasn't happened, but it's happening tonight. This is part of, we weren't on your list before, we're definitely on your list now. Here it is. It's a fabulous poster. We're so glad you're showing it to us. Now, let me see, I'm going to introduce Elizabeth. Just give me a second to look at my notes here. I'm sorry, I'm going to introduce Martha. I already introduced Elizabeth. So Martha Hunt Handler grew up in Northern Illinois, dreaming about wolves, and has always understood that her role in this lifetime is to tell stories and be a voice for nature. She has been an environmental consultant, a magazine columnist, an actress, and a polar explorer. She has also driven cross country in an 18-wheeler and been a grand prize winner of the Newlywed Game. Soon, did anybody recognize her from the Newlywed Game? Soon after she and her family relocated from LA to South Salem, New York, she began to hear wolves in her backyard. This was the start of her 20+ year career as an advocate for wolves at the Wolf Conservation Center, where she currently serves as board president. When not up near the wolves and her rescue pups, she can be found in New York City with her husband and 4 adult children. Winter of the Wolf is her first novel. Welcome.
Thank
Martha.
you. Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, so I used to be in New York, but now that COVID has hit, yeah, no book touring, and I'm in South Salem, New York, which is much smaller, about an hour outside. So I'm going to go back a little bit because I think the reason and the origin of my book starts when I was a young child, and I used to go into the woods behind my backyard that I called the Enchanted Forest, and I could actually literally hear the plants and animals talking to me. And when I found out that others didn't have this gift, I realized this was something that I was going to have to use to my advantage. And so I wanted to be a writer for animals that didn't have their voice. But when I was 7, I wrote and illustrated my first book called The Rabbit and His Friends. And my father told me that it wasn't a very, very inspiring book and that writers don't make any money. So I ended up becoming an environmental consultant, and I did that for about 20+ years, and it never really did much to my heart. And I was sort of confused trying to figure out what I wanted to do. We had 4 kids in 5 years, so I just got busy with kids and wasn't really thinking about it. And then when I was 42, my life was completely shattered when my best friend Gretchen found her 12-year-old son hanging from a belt. And it rocked my world on so many levels. We were both very spiritual. We believed that souls are here for the time they're supposed to be here. We'd always grown up this way. We were very strong in that. But somehow a 12-year-old dying just didn't make sense to either one of us. We couldn't imagine what he'd already learned or what he'd taught others that would make sense that he would leave at 12 years old. And because I also didn't know how to be a friend to her, because I'd never understood how suicides are very different from any other deaths, she got blame and shame and guilt thrown on her that was unbelievable. So I was like furiously journaling to try to deal with, how do I deal with the death of a 12-year-old, because I had kids the same age, and the fact that I don't know what to say to my best friend to make this any better. I'm just completely lost. One day, a few months later, I was skating on a lake and I found a deer embedded into the ice. And for some reason, I was just mesmerized by it. I was staring at it, and all of a sudden her son started speaking to me. And he told me that my journal entries were the beginning of a novel, and this was my story that I was supposed to tell. So although my book doesn't follow, other than the death itself, his story, I channeled him the entire way through, and he was always kind of pushing me to write this book. So here's my beginning. There's 2 quotes. The first one is from Banksy. "They say you die twice. One time when you stop breathing, and a second time a bit later on when somebody says your name for the very last time." And another one by Rumi. "Don't grieve, anything you lose comes around in another form." Chapter 1. My first thought is that I might be dead. I'm cold and stiff and I feel disoriented. If I'm not dead, then why am I lying on my back, something I never do? And why are the covers pulled over my head? I begin moving the fingers on my right hand slowly back and forth across the sheet, which feels somewhat reassuring. I slide my hand up along my body, brushing past my face before reaching out from underneath the covers. The frigid air startles me. I feel the top of my head and discover my hair is partially frozen. Very odd. Suddenly I hear voices in the distance. Gathering strength, I throw off the covers and force myself to sit up. Though every bone in my body aches as if I've been beaten, I exhale a huge sigh of relief. This isn't a morgue. It's my bedroom. It's freezing because I stupidly left my window open, which explains why I'm hearing these annoying voices. I slide over in my bed and reach to shut the window, and as I do, I notice that the water in the glass on my bedside table is frozen solid. Have I lost my mind? Why would I have left my window open in mid-November in northern Minnesota? Then I notice the blue hospital papers lying underneath the water glass, and in an instant, every horrific second of the previous night flashes through my mind. I'm likely sore because of how violently I was thrown around during our accident. And I opened my window because I thought I might be having a panic attack, and I hoped the cold air might snap me out of it. I was sweating, shaking intensely, and my heart was pounding like crazy. I felt lonely and scared. There was no one to help me. Mom was in shock. Dad was trying to console her. My two oldest brothers, Adam and Chase, would be totally useless, and my soulmate and favorite brother, Sam, was gone, as in dead gone. The voices outside get louder, disrupting my thoughts. They seem somehow unnatural. How can life possibly go on without Sam in it? I push aside the curtains to see who's there. Down on the frozen lake, I see Billy Bishop, Mike Clayton, and Richie Branson, all junior varsity hockey players, skating around something on the ice. I imagine that an animal has become frozen in the lake's surface. When the boys stop skating and begin poking whatever it is with their hockey sticks, I suddenly feel inexplicably outraged and oddly protective. Without thinking, I jump out of bed, run to the mudroom, slip into my winter boots, throw on my long down coat over my moose print flannel PJs, put on a hat and mittens, and run out down the door. Into the backyard while screaming like a lunatic, "Stop, don't touch it, get away, leave it alone." Their heads jerk up simultaneously and they give me odd looks. They quickly skate away, though Richie swivels his head to stare back at me for a second. It feels like an eternity. He's so incredibly hot with his curly brown auburn hair and piercing green eyes that normally I would have wanted to melt into the ice. I and probably every freshman girl in my school have a mad crush on him, but he must now think I've lost my mind. Or maybe he's already heard about Sam, as news travels fast in our small town, and he'll cut me some slack. I guess in the bigger scheme of things, a cute boy no longer matters. When I finally look down at the ice to see what it was they were poking, I find a beautiful young doe, which from her size I'm guessing is a yearling, lying in the area we all refer to as the black hole, the one spot in our neighborhood lake that always freezes last, due, we suppose, to an underground spring. This doe looks strangely ethereal, peaceful even, as if she's not deceased, but simply resting on the ice. This is odd because the other animals I've seen frozen in our lake, and there have been many over the years, have had horribly panicked looks on their faces, and their limbs were contorted into unnatural positions from their struggle not to succumb to drowning. Her left cheek, eye, ear, muzzle, and a small part of her neck lie exposed, while the rest frozen beneath the lake's surface. Her whiskers are especially cute. Each individual hair is coated in ice, which reminds me of a porcupine I made in kindergarten by sticking toothpicks into potato. I remember this art project for what it taught me. Even a plain brown potato could develop its own character with the simple addition of a few well-placed toothpicks. This was important for me to understand because I was at the time experiencing major separation issues from Sam. Though he was 2 years older, we'd always been nearly inseparable. When we weren't together, I didn't quite feel whole. I wasn't sure if there was a me without him. The 2 years when he attended school and I didn't were excruciatingly difficult, at least for me. I'd been counting down the days until I could attend kindergarten. But what I hadn't fully, we'd be at the same school, I wouldn't necessarily see him. Though his classroom was only 5 doors down from mine, there might as well have been an ocean between us. My teacher refused to let me visit him, and we didn't share the same lunch break or recess period. Sam wasn't like any other boys his age. He wasn't into violent video games or any electronics for that matter. He didn't have any social media accounts. He hated guns and hunting. He'd sooner nurse an injured squirrel back to health than shoot it with a BB gun. He didn't particularly like watching or playing sports. He wouldn't cut his hair or wear nice clothes. What he did enjoy was being out in nature, and so did I. We spent as much time as we could outdoors, and we didn't care if it was below zero or if the sky was loaded with biting black flies. But that fall, when he started second grade and I started kindergarten, everything changed. His class watched the movie Nanook of the North, and he became inexplicably mesmerized by the Inuit, an indigenous Arctic people. He'd always been drawn to Native Americans, but his interest in and admiration for the Inuit was even deeper. I think he'd probably been an Inuit in another life. That's the only explanation I have for his immediate connection to them. The Inuit are people who live with nature, not separate from it. They hunt to survive, but never for sport. They have respect for all souls and don't think of animals as being lower than us or soulless. And that was something Sam could relate to. From the time he was young, kids in our neighborhood called him Indian boy and freak. I felt terrible when he was picked on, but I wasn't big enough or strong enough to stop it. Sam never seemed particularly bothered by their taunts. He was courageous and steadfast in his belief, even when it cost him popularity votes. So yeah, that's the beginning of my novel. And as one reviewer put it, despite the gray beginnings, Winter the Wolf was a hopeful finish that left me feeling fulfilled and inspired. And that's what I want readers to be left with. The belief that death is not an ending, but merely a part of our life and rebirth cycle. And that when our loved ones pass, rather than grieve, that we should be grateful for the role that they played in their life and the time that we had with them. Yeah, and I hope that readers are also get deeply connected to Mother Earth and nature in general, because I think that's a big thing that's missing in our society right now. And on a more personal note, just their intuition, because I feel like if I had followed my intuition, I wouldn't be writing my first book at 61. It probably would have been written at 40, and I would have had 20 books by now, but I didn't follow that intuition. And yeah, so I'm coming out with my first book now. And all the proceeds from my book go to my Wolf Conservation Center. So I hope you'll learn more about what we do, because it's a very important time for wolves, as the current administration just delisted all gray wolves from the endangered species list. So the struggle is huge right now. But thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful, and I'm sticking around. I can't wait to hear everybody's stories.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. People are clapping. I know you can't hear them, but they are clapping for you and for Elizabeth as well.
Martha.
And for Elizabeth as well. I know. Do I keep confusing your name? So sorry. That is for me the wonderful challenge of having two authors here tonight, and so different, and each unique in her own way. Make sure you both check out the chat room to see what people have been saying. Who has a question though? I know there are a number of comments, but I'm wondering if anybody has a question for either Martha or Elizabeth. And Elizabeth, I wanted to ask, I think Martha was able to say really what she hopes readers will take away from the reading of her book. And I wanted to check in with you on that, Elizabeth, because yours, I believe, is a collection of essays. And you've also said it's sort of a combination between memoir and self-help. So classifying a book is sometimes a little bit of a weird thing. But I know I'd love to just hear you chat for a minute about what you take away as an author from having written the book, and what you hope your readers will take away.
Sure. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. I wrote it, I think, for myself first, and then I went back and read it, and I was like, oh, I'm really off track. So what readers have been telling me, they're really enjoying it, which is very gratifying for me. One reader said she journals after she reads each chapter because she learns a lesson, some particular lesson that she wants to apply to her own life. I have several other people that say it's changed my perspective about things, or I've had people say, this is really helping me. I'm in a transition. I'm getting older. This is really helping me manage that process. I'm feeling better. I'm feeling more confident. I've had other people say I'm reading one little story a night and I'm just savoring it because there's just so much wisdom. Somebody called it sage. And so all of that just feels very good to me. I feel like I channeled something else. I'm kind of similar to Martha in that way. I I read it and it's like, I know that I wrote it, but I think it came from somewhere else to help other people. And my life has been full of turmoil and abuse and loss and trauma and now chronic illness. I have a rare disease and just loss. I've lost my home twice. I've lost all my money a couple of times. You know, I grew up poor. And I think all of that was meant to help me tell these stories that are going to help other people. So that was kind of, I wrote the book first for myself, I think, to help myself. And then I realized as it was forming, oh, actually, I have things that I think will help other people. So hopefully that answers your question. People seem to like it.
Yes, yes. And well, you have such a warm and inviting way of talking about the struggles that you have encountered, which probably many of us who are listening have experienced one or two, or some of them, certainly they're universal struggles. And certainly it also sounds like you've had more than your share. And,
Yeah.
and that you are clearly a survivor and
Yeah.
thriving enough that you were able to really put together this book of insightful stories and wisdom in a way that is really about coping and overcoming and finding beauty amidst the challenges, and some sense of humor.
There is some humor in there. Yes, I have a story called Boobs Will Sag that's mostly for the women, but yeah, there is some humor in there. I did purposely write this one with a spirit of positivity and growth. I'm not one to dwell on things. I used to. So I had like 5 other books before this one that I tried to write. And this one was the one where I shifted my mindset. I understood that there is beauty in everything. There is purpose in everything. Every hard thing that we go through has purpose. And we just have to figure out what that is and how we kind of get through it and migrate through life, I guess.
So this very growth oriented idea that yes, you have these daily struggles, these things that you're overcoming on a daily basis, but clearly they haven't kept you down. They don't keep you down. That there's this internal drive to find the positive and keep on going, and then also bring the what you discover to share with other people if they're going through similar things. And
yeah, there is. I was a school teacher for a year. I start out in the book saying that I was a school teacher for a year, and I taught a lot of the bilingual kids, and I taught the ones that had really bad home environments. And the best part for me about the job was that there was nothing those children had been through that I had not also been through. Literally nothing. There was nothing. Abuse, whatever it was, I had been through it. So yeah, I think I'm hoping that that's kind of, it's like you go through that. I turn 40 next week. So this is like, okay, that was the first half. That's not going to define me the rest of my life. How do I take that and have a better second half? How do you take whatever your first half, first quarter, first 3 quarters are and learn how to use that to have an even better rest of your life?
wonderful. And the shape and structure of it, and I'm going to get back to Martha in just a second, but the shape and structure of this book it sounds like it's sort of memoir vignettes that also have this guidance
Yes.
aspect of it. Am I capturing that correctly?
Yes, every story in there has some sort of lesson to learn. I use my own life because I know it and I've been through so much, just to make it interesting and make it relatable so that you can kind of have a context for the lesson. But every story in there, there's 44 different ones. Every story has a different lesson about something, whether it's loneliness or aging or having an illness or abuse or loss, like losing my grandmother, who was like my soulmate, or, whatever it is, job loss, not knowing what you want to do for your career, not knowing your purpose, all of that is in there in just little snippets.
Wonderful. And what was the biggest challenge for you from this process?
From the writing?
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, getting out of my own way. I mean, I haven't submitted anywhere. I haven't tried to publish anything for half of my life because I was so afraid. And I finally, when I got sick, I thought I was dying for a while. And I do write about that a little bit, just like how those life-changing events don't necessarily change you, but it did kind of put the fear over there. and kind of push it aside enough for me to just go for it and stop judging myself and just write it and write what I wanted to read, because I was always trying to write things that fit into the mold of what people thought a book was. And I'm like, actually, I like writing little short snippets that are like a couple pages long. I like that. That's how I write. That works for me. So I'm just going to write what works for me. So that would be my suggestion to other writers, is just go, what do I like to do? And I'm not going to judge it. I'm just going to do it. I can judge it later when I'm editing. So that was the hardest.
So that negotiation inside your own head and the sense of urgency that you thought you were dying, these things really propelled you into overcoming and getting over that fear of silence and of not doing it, which was really interesting to hear. Thank you so much. It was really interesting to hear also you talking, Martha, about what was that impetus? What was that happening inside yourself that really said, now is the time? And for you, it was almost like the spirit figure of this, such an unusual thing, this spirit figure, the 12-year-old boy, wise perhaps beyond the years in which he was able to be on the earth, spoke to you and you listened. And that was such a wonderful introductory background for what you were talking about. You gave us so many different interesting details about the discovery of the needing to write almost coming from a spiritual process for you.
And, it's sort of sad that I had to come to that, because I feel like my gut was telling me for years, you're doing the wrong thing. You're this environmental consulting, writing technical papers doesn't feel good for you in any way. And I was just like, but who am I to be a writer? And how am I ever going to make money as a writer? And how is that ever going to work for me? And who's ever written? I never showed anything to anybody. So when people say to me, like, how much of your protagonist being is you? When I think about it, I think she's me. If I had listened to my inner wisdom, my knowing, my gut, I would have chosen to be a writer from the get-go, but I just was not secure enough to listen to it. And that's like such an important thing. I don't know if one of my favorite books is The Gift of Fear. And it talks about, we have so much inner knowing, like, right? You get goosebumps, you get chills, your heart races, you get so many signals if something is good or bad. And the good might be just, you feel really comfortable with someone. You feel like I feel like I've known them all my life, even though I just met them. Like, those are those good feelings of like, this is good energy. You should be around this. This is really positive. But half the time our mind gets in the way and says, who are you to think you're a writer? What story do you have to tell that hasn't already been told? Like, I can.
But it was this 12-year-old boy, maybe, or because you came a lot of resistance, and we all have to in order to get these books read or these poems written or this whatever. And it sounds like this voice of this figure based in this loss, he was never really gone. He really spoke to you in such a powerful way.
Yes.
And that helped you overcome.
Yes. It still took me 18 years to write this book. I wasn't serious about it because I wouldn't tell anybody what I was doing. So I was like, secretly, I had 4 kids in 5 years. I didn't really have time to do it. I was like writing when I could. And it was only when I finally said, I have to be honest with everybody about what I'm doing. And they have to know that I'm going to give this many hours every day. I'm getting an office. I'm serious now. Like, this is what I'm doing. That's when it took, like, for the muse to really show up full time, and for this boy to show up full time, and to like get this story finally told, was being honest with my own desires and my own beliefs. But it took a while.
Yeah. Thank you. And I have one other question I wanted to ask you, which was why? So how did you always know this was fiction, that it was going to be a novel that you were writing? And tell us how you knew that, or how you came to that.
I think Brendan early on, who I was channeling, told me, you can't use anything except the way I died. And other than that, this is your story. And so it was like I had this little help, but I also had this platform for jumping in. So I was trying to imagine, because it's a sister looking at her brother's death, trying to imagine, and my friend had a daughter. And even though I didn't speak to her, I had a lot of experience with suicides. I mean, I've probably lost, I don't know, I've probably known 10 people at least that have lost their lives since I grew up, I guess. So I was kind of always around suicides and always hearing them talked about. And I knew I had something to say on the subject. So it was like, yeah, this permission to just delve into like, what is that like for people that are going through suicides? And I've gotten such good feedback. I mean, the things I didn't expect was to hear from people saying, oh my God, like the fact that you didn't experience a suicide in your life, in your family, I don't know how you understood and how different people deal with it. But it was, you know, research and talk. I went to people that dealt with it and just sat with them, and that was a painful process, but it was good for me and hopefully good for them to get something off their chest. Yeah, because it's sad how we treat suicides different. It's just, my girlfriend was like, at the funeral, people were asking her like, well, why didn't you get him help? Why wasn't he on a medication? Why, you know, and he was like a happy, adjusted 12-year-old. There was no reason to think that he was depressed. So you just realize we put a lot of stigma on suicides when it's just another soul leaving. It's not, yeah.
So you've had, both of you have had a lot of courage and a lot of drive to have your stories come into the world. You've put a ton of work into them. I will be putting the links to your books, both of you, and your websites into the chat room. And there are a lot of comments. I'm not really seeing a lot of questions except one about, for you, Elizabeth, about poetry, whether you also write poetry. And I know that you do. So maybe you two might spend a little time when it's convenient to answer or just connect with the people in the chat room who really want to connect with you as we move into the open mic phase. And I just really want to thank you both for coming and sharing your books with us tonight. They're so different in a way, but there are really some very interesting connections in terms of the reason, this desire to really tell your story, have your story be out there in the world, and also for it to really have an impact, a positive impact around really important issues, and have that out in the world. And I know people in the chat room are very interested and connected with your books. So you can feel free to unmute everybody, just to give us a big round of applause for Elizabeth Haynes and Martha Handler for sharing your beautiful stories and books tonight.
Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing everything.
Yay. Yes, thank you. And so I am going to just thank you, and I'm going to end the recording.